Long before video games had ever become popular, the earliest forms of the video game controller was first introduced in the arcade space. In 1947, the cathode ray tube amusement device was first mentioned publicly, and it became the earliest form of a video game, as well as its controller. The controller itself was nearly identical to the one seen on a current pinball machine, a simple rotating knob. Although the game was rather primitive, it was quickly adopted by the public due to it being the first ever video game, and helped pave the way for more complex video games, as well as more complex means of input. The joystick became the successor to the turning knob, and put forth more complex input than its humble predecessor. The first public example of a joystick was the Atari 2600 console, which released in 1972. The joystick was a simple device, featuring one single stick with one single fire button on the end. The Atari joystick help made the system, which was brought on the eve of the home console revolution, popular amongst the public and set the foundation for many more consoles to follow. The downfall of the joystick. Nearly all of the gaming public at the time was familiar with the single joystick and its one fire button, but Atari stepped things up in 1982 and released the Atari Boomerang. This was extremely well received by the gaming public, and although the Boomerang is long gone, its presence left an everlasting mark on the gaming industry today. As video games and the controller designs to accompany them continued to develop, the designs of them became more and more complex. This was easily apparent in the Atari T-Blade joystick. This joystick was the first joystick to feature more than one control stick contained within the same controller. This gave the public more of an ability to add inputs for more complex games instead of the traditional one joystick affair. The public responded positively to this new design and propelled the advancement of video games even further. Despite the success that the joystick enjoyed through arcade and console gaming in general, it would soon start to suffer in the late 1980s due to the emergence of improved and more complex ways of gaming. The joystick would remain a constant for arcade gaming for some time more, however it was replaced by such things within console gaming, and soon made its final exit from the gaming industry in 1984. An introduction to the N64 controller. The Nintendo 64, released in 1996, was the first of its kind to expand on the controller design. This iconic gaming system ushered in revolutionary gameplay and design concepts that laid the foundation of modern gaming. Equally impactful was the N64's peripheral device conception, notably the N64 controller. This device was really the first to effectively bring analog input technology to gaming, enhancing the level of interactivity offered by the video game industry. The Nintendo 64 controller, famously dubbed the Trident by its fans, saw few changes from its prototype design. Differences from the iconic Nintendo gamepad were immediately noticeable. The Zelda-esque Trident was a chunky, three-pronged behemoth which provided ergonomics that would become foundational in later controllers. Along the controller's edges were two analog sticks, two shoulder buttons, four middle face buttons, a sturdy D-pad, and a time-honored start button. The analog sticks were revolutionary and are still used to this day on most dual-stick controllers. They provided much greater control and free movement, which greatly improved the control over first-person shooters, sports games, and 3D platformers. While digital input controllers like the original NES controller were limited to directions of north, south, east, and west, the analog stick provided a much greater range of motion. The N64 controller also came with improvements in rumble and data storage technology. No longer was the player completely dependent on their eyes and ears to keep in tune with the game. The N64 controller also came with improvements in rumble and data storage technology. No longer was the player completely dependent on their eyes and ears to keep in tune with the game. The N64 was the first gaming system to offer the Rumble Pak peripheral, a device that fit into the controller and literally gave the player physical feedback using a unique vibration system. It was also the first gaming controller to feature the analog C-stick, which allowed for precise camera control in 3D environments. This was perfect for use in games like Mario 64, where the section of the traditional D-pad allocated to camera control lacked specificity and fluidity. The other major innovation that the N64 controller brought to the table was ergonomics. It was the first controller to successfully organize all the buttons, sticks, and peripherals with a practical and comfortable design. For the first time, players could spend long gaming sessions without their hands cramping or becoming too tired. This inspired other console developers to create more ergonomic layouts for their controllers. The N64 controller's iconic design served as a template for the DualShock, Xbox 360 controller, and many of the other game controllers that came after it. The bottom line is, the N64 controller showed us that the unique physicality of playing a video game was just as important as the software. Without the impact of this extraordinary innovation, gaming as we know it may not even exist.